Hello, everyone. I'm Vinayak Sriram, and welcome to the Legal Exchange podcast. In this episode, we're going to be discussing the hottest topic in international economics and globe and trade, the Trump tariffs. I'm happy to be joined by Wai Ming. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, by the time this episode goes out, the tariffs might look very different from what they are at the time of recording, but we'll just assume that they are not going to change too much. I know that's not a very safe assumption at this moment, but perhaps you could begin by just explaining a little bit of the background. I mean, I think most people will be aware of some of the background. Perhaps you could just explain if in case there's anybody who's been living under a rock for the last month, a little bit of the background to these tariffs and how it affects Malaysia and Malaysians.
Let's look at the background of the tariff itself. Tariff has been used by many countries. They are financial tariffs. They are non-trade tariff barriers as well. So what Trump has done is actually has used this as a kind of a bargaining chip, a weapon of some sort. And he has actually on what we call the Liberation Day announced a whole suite of tariff practically on every country on earth, okay, with a minimum baseline of 10%, save for Russia, where he didn't impose any. So, and then he put up a formula which actually talks about the trade deficit that the US has with the other country divided by the total number of imports into the country because US imports a lot of the stuff. And then you come up with a certain number and you divide it by two. They say, I give you a concession, I'm giving you only 50%. So the whole formula works out to be a bit of a misguided formula by most of the economists because they say that doesn't make sense because you are measuring apples and oranges and so on. They are not consistent. So when we talk about the tariff itself, at the end of the day, we are looking at him imposing this tariff with a view of trying to pressure the other countries to kind of like reduce the trade deficit with USA. And if countries negotiate with him to say, I will buy more stuff from USA, then we will kind of like reduce the tariff to make sure that he will bring more money back into the US on that basis. So Singapore, even though we had a trade surplus, was imposed with a 10%. Malaysia, 24. China at the time was something like 34 or 36, I can't remember. And then when China refused to talk to them, he keep increasing it all the way to 145. And then the latest I heard was like something like 245 or something like that. And China redo the same thing, reverse, and says, look, we will impose 125, and that's the maximum because the more tariff you impose, it means to say that trade doesn't occur between the two countries. So literally, trade actually stops. So when trade stops, it hurts both countries. US, when they want to buy the stuff, US always think that tariff is paid for by the exporting country. It's not true. It's always paid for by the consumer. And similarly, when China imposes a reciprocal tariff on the US goods, the Chinese consumer will find it very expensive. So they will look for other sources. So what will naturally happen is that the non-US countries who don't have tariff with each other, they will try to move their arrangements of businesses with each other more than they would do with USA. But USA's strategy is to make sure that when you do this, you want to bring back more so-called activities back to the States. But unfortunately, when tariff kicks in, prices tends to go up because you're paying for the tariff. And as a result of that, inflation goes up. So the net effect is that if this carries on, naturally there will be a recession. Okay, and recession won't be just limited to USA, it will be around the world, and there could be a trigger for a global recession. There's a high risk. So as a result of that, you can see that, when Wall Street takes a plunge, when the tariff was announced, he then talks about having a 90-day pause so that we can allow parties to negotiate. When he does that pause, the stock market went up again to think that there could be a result that would be favorable.
So, but this is a really interesting area. You mentioned that part of the announced strategy of the U.S. is to sort of realign their economy, or maybe realign global supply chains, however you look at it. But it also there seems to be another side to it, which is it. I mean, the tariffs being used as a negotiating tool. What do you make of this debate between uh, two sides? One that it's a kind of long-term strategy to realign the U.S. economy, and the other being a kind of negotiating tactic that the U.S. that this current administration is using to get leverage over other countries.
I think you could understand Trump. President Trump, profiled himself as a successful businessman. So he's using business strategy to extract concessions from the other countries, and literally, he's trying to impose it on every country in the world to do that. So he even announced to say that people are lining up to talk to him, and using some not very presidential language to say that people are lining up to kiss his ass. So really, I mean, that's not what the president should be saying. So he has a lot of team members trying to negotiate with so many people, including Malaysia. Okay, we have already announced that we are sending delegations there. You can imagine that literally almost every country in the world are sending delegations to the US. US cannot be dealing with so many people, to talk about trade negotiations and how to, kind of like balance out the trade deficit. It's only China who doesn't send anything. They say, look, you want to talk to me, you come to me, not the other way around, right? But of course, most recently, we find out that, despite whatever it is, there's a delegation that has arranged to meet in Switzerland to talk about this. And you can find out that each party will hold up their tough position. I don't bear a lot of hope that a lot of things will, happen.
Right.
There may be minor concessions because really tariff war, which happens this way, is going to change a lot of the supply chain. It is not as if they can bring jobs to America straight away. Factories need to be created. Workers need to be trained. And even if you set up shop in the United States, the raw materials are coming from all over the world. So even iPhones, you can imagine, right? The intellectual property may be residing in the United States, but the parts are made in China,
Right.
right? Even a lot of your aeroplane parts, your car parts, a lot of this other material, where do you get the material? Is from other countries. And China is a big, the manufacturing center, and they have a very good supply chain. So to impose all those things and you impose 145% tariff on that, what happens? You will still need to import those things, which is why the iPhones and the computer stuff are so expensive. It's so expensive. During the pause period, people are going out there to buy cars, buy iPhones. They think that it will shoot off the roof. And at the same time, when you spend money like that buying more expensive stuff, what happens if you are a businessman in the United States? You can't absorb all those yourself. You have to pass it on to consumers. Overall, everybody has to pay for it. So in the context of Malaysia, we probably need to readjust. The thing is, it's also an opportunity for Malaysia, in the sense that, look, if they need to punish China, will China then move some of those supply chain operation outside of China into Vietnam, into Malaysia? Vietnam and Cambodia, unfortunately, they were slapped with very high tariffs. The simple thing is that they use this stupid formula of trade deficit divided by some of the exports. You can imagine a country like Vietnam or Cambodia, they produce a lot of things for export to help their economy. You pay the worker there maybe less than what, $50 or maybe less than $100 a month, right? For the worker that you pay. The same worker, if it is in the United States, they have minimum wage, they have labor strikes and everything else. The same guy who needs to do that simple task will have to be paid a minimum wage of maybe what, $600 or $1,000, right? It's multiple times what you will pay in a country like that. So country like Cambodia and Vietnam will suffer a lot. So even though you want to move your supply chain there, it won't work, right? So where do you find Malaysia is 24%, better than Vietnam is 60%, and then they may come here. But I'm also not so hopeful because this talk about the imposing tariff, you pause it, renegotiate. Where does it land? We do not know. So business people want certainty. You cannot plan, a factory thinking that tomorrow your price, your raw materials like that. Next week it will be like that, and then another week it will be like that. You need to hedge. You need to procure the raw material for your for your factory lines over the next maybe quarter supply and so on. You cannot have all these things fluctuating.
So that's a really good area to explore, I think, because there'll be a lot of business, especially SMEs, who'll be a little bit concerned about not just about the tariffs, but about their. From the outside, it looks a little bit chaotic. What percentage will it be tomorrow? Will the Malaysian government's efforts to negotiate work? How do small businesses navigate this? I mean, is there any way that they can protect themselves against this sort of uncertainty, this sort of chaotic policymaking?
I think SME probably suffers the brunt of what is happening because they are probably small. They may not have the sustainability to last a long trade war, so to say. If this lasts for 90 days or half a year or even a year, businesses will die.
Yeah.
You can even imagine, even in China, where there are a lot of these smaller operations, they literally ask people to lay off workers or stop work because you manufacture so many of this. Let's say the Christmas season comes, all your Christmas gifts and so on, which is meant for the stores in United States, they're not being shipped out there. And you even have a case where, because the tariff was imposed when the ship was halfway sailing there, some of these people took the very, not the nice things to do. They go and dump these things into the sea because it's too costly to ship it back. So it's not good for the environment.
Well, before we started recording, you mentioning to me that there was a case that you've actually dealt personally with a situation where these tariffs have affected.
Well, it's not so much
a client. What was that? Maybe I think that's really because it's a real example. And I think it's useful to demonstrate the kind of practical effect that this can have on businesses.
Well, I was involved in a case, not so much in relation to the tariff, but it was in relation to U.S. trying to restrict technology or high value technology from being exported to China. So this was in relation to how DeepSeek, when it was first announced, they only spent a small amount of maybe $6 million as opposed to the billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar ChatGPT module that they are trying to do to create the same result. So ChatGPT, when they found out that they are using the NVIDIA chips to power their so-called AI engine, US finds that, hey, I was upended, So again, the Trump administration put up an order to say, we cannot export all these high-level chips, and they tell NVIDIA, don't sell these things to China. But NVIDIA sells it to the whole world, right? So what happened in this case is that before all these sanctions or restrictions on high-value chips being sold to China, it was legal. So people can buy the chips and send to China, or China can buy directly. So this company, which is actually set up in Singapore, which actually is owned by a Chinese operation, they've been buying some of these things and they are selling it to third parties, including those they sold to Malaysia. So the Malaysian company took those chips and on-sell it to China. So because of the trade restrictions on these high-value chips, Singapore was kind of like obligated to follow and observe those trade restrictions because otherwise Singapore will also get slapped, right? So the authority in Singapore started investigating these transactions, and they actually arrested the owners of the company that actually bought the chips. And then the real question is when they bought the GPU, we call it the graphic processing units, and then they on-sell it to another party in Malaysia. The question is whether the end destination, the end user was in Malaysia, right? But for somebody who sells it to a second buyer and the second buyer sells it to a third buyer, is there a way for them to control the subsequent sub-sale, right? So those are the questions
So
that came
I
about.
think so. This is where it intersects with this issue of these U.S. tariffs, because I think the big question people are asking is, what are the tests for whether you get caught or not? I mean, what areas of the Malaysian economy do you think are likely to be affected by these tariffs? I mean, who should really be thinking about?
Honestly, I think almost everything is going to be affected because there's no single item which is like immune from the tariff. Everything that you consume, everything that you manufacture, there will be some parts that is coming from somewhere else, unless you are saying that I'm only manufacturing it based on raw materials from Malaysia. But even from Malaysia, you sell it to Malaysia, no issue, right? But if you are selling it and manufacturing it for sale overseas, if you're selling it to the United States, you'll be slapped with the tariff. Unfortunate thing is that the US is the largest consumer in the world, so to say, on a lot of products. So throughout the decades, US is a consumer society, whereas I think Asians or Asia, they are more a saving nation, right?
Yeah.
Your parents tells you, you earn so much money, you put some money into the
Yeah.
savings. But United States, people are, spend more than you earn, kind of thing, and it's a consumer society. So it has been built up over that way. So if factories and businesses have already developed that market for United States, and suddenly the market is out, you have excess capacity. Where do you then sell your products to? You can only sell it to each other, but each other, do you want to buy so many of these things? So there will always be redundancy when you have this they always accuse overcapacity, right? This term. So they even accuse China of having this overcapacity for EV. But overcapacity is a technical term because if the government, roll out incentive for you to, let's say, have more charging stations, and the government is providing those free land for you to do this, they say that that's part of your subsidy, that kind of thing, and you roll it in and say, oh, you're overcapacity, right?
Yeah.
So in the same way, in United States, they're also doing it, but they don't count it, they will only count it for other people. So, and anyway, the tariff is not a measure of the entire trade, is only on goods. They miss out on services. Services is a big sum relating to, intercompany, national trade. Singapore, like, for example, we don't have a manufacturing base which is like Malaysia or in China, but it is a trading hub. So we trade. So services in accounting, legal, and all those financial services. As a financial hub, you're doing trade services, right?
Right.
So you will be affected because services is always ancillary, complementary to the actual goods.
So like trade goes down, your need for
Services
services
go down,
will definitely.
will go down. So when you look at it over the last couple of years, when we already had that trade friction between US and China,
Yes.
a lot of the US law firms, big law firms, shut their office in China because they don't have enough services demand for them, and US are not investing in China, so those firms close business.
Right.
So we have that. So when we talk about Malaysia, how do we help the SME?
Yeah.
Very difficult. So one of the other ways that the help should come from is the government providing some form of a lifeline. But the problem with that is that money has a finite area.
I mean, we can't just print money.
Well, you
and-
can print
and
money
dump
if
it
you're USA.
Yeah.
Because US dollar is the world reserve currency.
Sure.
You print it, the whole world supports it because it's a world reserve currency. So there's a move towards maybe less dependency on US dollar as a reserve currency, but it will take time.
Yeah.
And in fact, most of the other countries now are trying to say, look, let's trade in our own currency because US has kind of like weaponized the US dollar to a large extent. if you look at the, the, the country that has the most borrowings in the world is the United States.
Yeah.
But why are they able to print so much money and people still rely on it? Because you buy US Treasury, when the time comes to pay you back, I print more US Treasury, give it back to you. It's just paper trade, right?
Right.
So at the end of the day, I think that the world needs to rebalance itself, but it's going to be a long-term process. Short-term wise, people will suffer, which is why I think the prediction that there will be a kind of a global recession will be real if the trade war doesn't resolve itself.
So, in terms of immediate steps that the Malaysian government could take, I mean, obviously they've announced various packages to assist SMEs, but I'm now going to put you in the shoes of the Malaysian negotiator, trade negotiator in Washington D.C. What do you say to the administration? I mean, how do you just cave in because they're second largest trading partner? Is there anything? Do we have any leverage, or do we just?
I think the only leverage we are talking about, you can imagine that with the tariff being imposed, everybody says that they are lining up to talk to the U.S. administration. Everybody's sending delegation there, and you can see that even for the new Prime Minister of Canada and so on, they're so diplomatic. He will not offend him, but he will subtly say that we will work together. The only way to make this guy happy is to literally play up his ego and make him feel good.
Praise his business acumen.
But you can see that people are going to see through all that, right? And hopefully we get the deal out of it. We were just talking. If you are appointed as a trade negotiator to join the Anwar team, send you to the States. What are you going to talk to Trump, right? You're going to.
Mr. President, you're a very brilliant businessman. You're really, but that seems to be working. I mean, that's one thing that does work.
True.
Beyond that, I'm really not sure what Malaysia. They are I think our second largest trading partner after Singapore. But it puts us on the back foot, really.
I think the most important thing is that countries outside of the United States should start looking at doing business or changing the way of doing business as if the United States is not going to be there in the long run. I think that should be the focus. So, for example, even Singapore and Malaysia, we have a new election, in Singapore, the same government came in and they work with Malaysia. They say, look, we set up this Johor SEZ, maybe we do more trade together. So that will stimulate intra-national ASEAN trade so that we can hopefully divert some of the market which is meant for the United States into this region outside of the United States. But there will still won't be enough to cover, to be honest. It will take time and US will suffer for sure, 100%.
Yeah.
So unless you have a situation where Trump decides that the feeling in the back home is so bad that he's going to lose maybe a mutiny of some sort, people striking and not happy, he may change his tune and say, I'm going to reduce tariff and the war will come back. And then he will make a killing in the stock market. As he has already said that his own cronies in the White House, when he announced the pause, this guy made 1.5 billion, this guy made 900 million. I mean, that's a clear market manipulation. You can do a few rounds of that, right? And then you make tons of money.
Right.
So as a result of that, what do? So let them play that stock market game, but internationally outside of the United States, let's try to work together and see how we can survive between us without having to rely on the other party.
Well, that's really interesting. I think so. We're drawing to the end of our time here discussing this, but so there's going to be a lot of topics, related topics that we haven't had time to get to. How this is going to affect our relationship with China being a major one. But I thought I'd just finish off by asking. I think there'll be a lot of Malaysians, certainly a lot of my fellow Malaysians I've spoken to, who have wondered if there's anything we can do. Is there anything that our brother and sister Malaysians can do to pull together to try to ensure that we all can ride out this pretty turbulent period.
I think Malaysians are very practical people, okay? When you have a deal out in the market, you won't buy the most expensive stuff, right? You will be going bargain hunting. So naturally, if things are going to be more expensive, you go to the cheaper source. So in that sense, if you can, if US products are going to be more expensive, then you will look for alternative products. And if China products are more expensive, they are not going to be more expensive outside of US. It's more expensive in the US because of the tariff. So in that sense, there will be market play, which you can still work together with China, or not just China, between ASEAN, between Europe, and so on, and there will be more closer cooperation between the non-US kind of things. But the only problem is that the US has very long reach of their arm to compel people. If you are not my friend, you're my enemy, right? So you can actually tell your friends to put pressure on other people who are not my friends.
Right.
Good example, like Singapore being asked to impose this so-called, high-end chips and so on.
Yeah.
We have to follow the rules. Otherwise, we will suffer. So we have that kind of issue. It's not going to go away so soon. Okay, Vinaya.
We'll see. Well, I mean, we'll see. Who knows what will happen by the time people watch this podcast? Whether there'll be any tariffs or higher tariffs or different ones, we'll wait and see. But I mean, thank you so much for sharing with us your insights and your experience on this. And well, we'll. As I said, we'll wait and see what happens, but wishing everyone out there the best of luck. And thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Legal Exchange podcast. See you next time.
Thank you.